Applause. Criminal acts are as old as humanity itself. They tell tales of anger and hatred, greed and suffering, death and depravity. Nothing affords us a deeper look into the sinister depths of a past epoch than the crimes committed during it. Many criminal cases of the distant past still remain unsolved today. No one had the tools to detect the perpetrators. But what was then impossible can now be done. Today's cutting-edge forensic science offers methods for solving many cold cases of antiquity. High-tech diagnostic and forensic procedures help to solve crimes that for centuries had left people scratching their heads. Arsonists are identified, conspirators convicted, and murderers unmasked. The perpetrators may be long dead, but their crimes live on. In this episode, we look at a mysterious assassination, a gruesome execution, and a brutal massacre. A famous pharaoh fell victim to a conspiracy. Nothing less than the seat of Egyptian power was at stake. The Valley of the Kings in ancient Egypt, it was the period known as the New Kingdom, the era of the great pharaohs. The last one of them died in the year 1156 BC. Ramses III, he had ruled Egypt for over 30 years. As a field commander, the pharaoh had fought the incursion of foreign peoples, and to cement his legacy, he had erected a series of monumental temples. Ramses III was one of the last pharaohs to initiate really large-scale buildings in the New Kingdom, and one of his most memorable temples is his Horary Temple, his temple of millions of years, which is at Medina Tabu in western Thebes. The Horary Temple still stands today. The complex gives a vivid impression of the great size and magnificence of the shrines in pharaohic Egypt. When Ramses III was laid to rest here more than 3,000 years ago, there was no indication that he had died an unnatural death. But modern forensic examinations of the mummy have now revealed evidence of a different scenario. Was Ramses III murdered? Although he was a great builder and a warrior, people were not totally happy with him as king because his reign was not without trouble. And so people must have been suffering. They were suffering about food. They were suffering about security. So really it was a time of great tenseness. The high-risk sites of the royal building projects became hot spots of dissent. Working conditions were severe, and accidents an everyday occurrence that fermented rebellion amongst the workers. Some began to doubt the wisdom of the great pharaoh. But just how far did the temple builders' anger go? An answer can be found at the Museo Egiptio in Turin, Italy, home to one of the world's foremost collections of ancient Egyptian papy. No one knows the contents of these records better than German curator Susanna TVA. That includes an exceptionally important papyrus dating from the era of Ramses III. There's writing on the entire papyrus front and back. This is the front side, but there's writing on the back as well. Right at the beginning here, it's reported that the workers went on strike because they didn't get their rations, grain in particular. They didn't go to work. They approached the authorities and lodged a complaint. The papyrus gives us the oldest source of a workers' strike in the recorded history of humanity, an action aimed directly at the pharaoh. Ramses III was the first person in history to ever have to deal with a sit-in strike. So the workmen of the Valley of the Kings were not being paid. So they all marched to his temple and said, "We will sit here until we get paid." The temple workers demanded to be paid in kind, as was customary at the time. How would Ramses react? First, 55 loaves of bread were dispensed. Later, the grain and vegetable rations. Also, fish, water, drinking water were given to the laborers. Once the demands of the temple builders had been met, they returned to their labors. Social equilibrium had returned to the kingdom on the Nile. But 3 years later, the temple builders again took strike action. This is also documented in the papyrus. But this time, it wasn't about unpaid wages or the lack of food supplies. It states here quite clearly that they did not wish to issue a complaint because they were hungry. Rather, they wanted to complain of an injustice that had occurred. They wanted to go before the pharaoh to report an injustice. Some Egyptologist colleagues interpret this reference as possible foreknowledge of a plot to assassinate Ramses III. A premeditated assassination of Ramses III. In whose interest would that have been? Here, too, the papyrus from the Mosio, a Gishio collection, offered insight. It documents a conspiracy against the pharaoh and even names the ringleaders. This papyrus speaks of the women in the harem, but does not exactly say what happened. It's actually more of a list of the conspirators. But what motive did the conspirators have? And why does the papyrus so pointedly name them as women of the harem? As all pharaohs, Ramses III had multiple wives who all lived in a separate tract of the palace. When there is more than one wife and more than one child, there are bound to be rivalries and jealousies and desire for power. So after reigning for 30 years, it was clear this was definitely a time the king must have a successor appointed. So it was about succession to the throne. But Ramses III had not specified which of his many sons from many different wives should be his heir. A relief in Thirari Temple of the Pharaoh depict a presentation of all sons deemed eligible to succeed to the throne, 13 princes in all. But Ramses III neglected to have the name and rank in line for the throne carved under the images of the boys. The procession of the princes still shows us no more than a series of potential successors. But the mother of one of the princes determined to help her son ascend the throne. One of Ramses' secondary wives, Queen Tia, decided that she wanted her son, Penaware, to be king, and so she plotted the assassination of her husband so that her son could rule all of Egypt. But who else was in on the treacherous conspiracy to eliminate the pharaoh? The conspiracy to kill Ramses III was quite complex, as it would have to be. So, really, it was penetrating every little nook and cranny of the palace, infrastructure as well as people outside, because the plan was to not just kill the king but cause an insurrection outside, and then Penna was supposed to step in and take over, and Sir grab hold and control the entire country. So the assassination of Ramses III would be nothing less than a sweeping political takeover. It was a very large pack of conspirators, which shows how unpopular this pharaoh was in his lifetime. The motive of the conspirators is clear. Dissatisfied with the pharaoh's leadership, they wanted to overthrow him. For the assassination itself, they chose a special event. The beautiful festival of the valley was originally a burial right at the necropolis, but by the time of Ramses III, things had changed and had become known as a festival of drunkenness. While the people drank and made merry, the pharaoh embarked on a boat ride, a symbolic journey to the realm of the dead, accompanied by high priests. He crossed the Nile, but Ramses III still did not suspect that assassins lay in wait for him on the other side. The plan to assassinate Ramses III did not just focus on killing him, but it involved other things, including magic. This is perhaps why priests were involved. There seems to have been some kind of magical spells, and perhaps also poisons or something involved in his death. In an act of ritual sacrifice, the conspirators offered wax figurines to the fire. This voodoo magic was presumably meant to weaken the pharaoh's resistance. All systems would now go for the assassination, but apparently word of the conspiracy had leaked out at the last minute. At least, that is a court report found in the Turin Papyrus. The conspirators were brought before a special tribunal. The chief prosecutor was Ramses III himself. The court sentenced all assassins and their co-conspirators to severe sentences. The ones who were very noble were allowed to commit suicide. Others were killed. They were even impaled. And still others were just punished. Either they had their feet beaten, and many of them had cuts, so their noses, ears, lips, etc. would be cut off, which was a common kind of punishment for evildoers in ancient Egypt. That's the official version of the failed assassination attempt as recorded after the pharaoh's death in Egyptian papyri. But did Ramses III really survive the assassination? In 2012, an international research team subjected the mummy of the ancient Egyptian pharaoh to its first ever examination with modern imaging technology. Xanomummy researcher Albert Sink was instrumental in that spectacular study of the pharaoh's mummified remains. All we had up till then were x-rays of the mummy, and we hoped that with the new imaging methods, computer tomography, we'd gain fresh insight, especially into the death of Ramses III. The results of the computer tomographic analysis were a sensation. They shed a completely new light on the case. The CT images show quite clearly that Ramses III received a very deep cut to the throat area while he was still alive. The stab wound goes all the way to the bone, and it's a clear indication that it was fatal for Ramses III. His throat was literally slit through, and we can also see that afterwards an attempt was made during the mummification process to heal this wound for the afterlife. The computer tomography images contradicted the theory that the assassination plot against Ramses III was foiled. On the contrary, it appeared the assassins had in fact ended the pharaoh's life with a single well-executed slit of the throat. You must have spurted out with blood. This is a very forceful wound. It must have been done by someone who was quite strong, presumably from the back. Did they hold his head back and then make a cut? These are all questions we have. But certainly there's a feeling that you must have had his head pulled back and get his throat to be so exposed for such a gash to be made. And the CT scans revealed something else. As well, when embalming the murdered pharaoh, the ancient mortician had given the mummy an amulet. There was an amulet placed here, and this amulet was the Eye of Horus, which is a healing amulet. And so putting it here meant that there was an effort being made to heal this, so that in the afterlife the king would be whole and complete. In the Egyptian belief system, the pharaoh's physical injuries had to be mended before his body could be sent on to the realm of the dead. This was a criterion for a dignified funeral. But what happened to the corpses of the assassins? Where were they buried? Amongst the royal mummies that were retrieved in the 19th century, there is one very enigmatic body. It was called Unknown Mani, and it was unlike any other mummy because it was not properly mummified. The face was in a horrible scream. Recent work carried out in Egypt has suggested that maybe this is the body of Penawar, the son of Ramses III, and possibly the murderer of Ramses III. But was the mummy really that of Ramses' son? Modern forensic science can deliver an answer. To this end, microbiologists did a DNA comparison. All they needed as a sample were minuscule amounts of body cells, which can still be taken from millennia-old Egyptian mummies today. The cellular material is the key to the DNA of the dead. Within our genome, we have sequences that are unique for every person. And because one half is inherited from our mother, the other half from our father, we can just use these unique sequences by comparing them to the person in question. Carrying out a genetic paternity test involves STR analysis. STR stands for short tandem repeats, the term for a repetitive pattern of short base pairs.